Recording. Here we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Howie Hawkins. I was the Green Party and Socialist Party candidate for president in 2020. And this podcast, Green Socialist Notes, is about continuing to educate and advocate for the eco-socialist program we ran on. And today we have Frieda Afary back on. She was on in October because this U.S.-Israeli assault on Iran began. And so we're going to talk today about that war and solidarity with the Iranian people, and particularly the progressive movements in Iran. Frieda is an Iranian-American librarian, translator, and author known for her work on socialist feminism and her translations of Iranian progressive literature. She wrote a book, and we'll put a link to it, called Socialist Feminism, A New Approach. She produces 2 blogs. We'll put links to these: Iranian Progressives in Translation and socialistfeminism.org. She's a member of the editorial board of New Politics and very active in a wide range of organizations, from the local level, the Northeast Los Angeles Alliance for Democracy, to international solidarity with Iranian and Ukrainian progressives. So we'll put a couple of articles as we go along that Frieda has done, including a couple of interviews she did with Ukrainian leftists. But you can find a lot more by Googling Frieda Afary. So welcome back to Green Socialist Notes, Frieda.
Hello, Howie. Thank you.
Yeah, let's just start with your assessment of the impact of the U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran, on the region, for progressives inside Iran, and for the internationalist left around the world. There's a lot to talk about there, so I'll just let you get started, and I'll ask some more questions as we go along.
Sure, there's so much to cover. So if there's something that you think I haven't covered, please let me know. So, I mean, on the immediate level, what we've seen is, since the U.S. and Israeli bombing started on February 28th, we've seen them bomb military sites, oil depots, schools. I think most people know about the girls' school that was bombed, which 175 girls were killed in Minab, in the southern part of Iran. Hospitals and clinics have been bombed, and residential buildings, banks, water desalination plants. And just yesterday, the U.S. struck the Kharg Island, which is the terminal or export depot for 90% of Iran's oil. And as far as I know, concerning casualties, there are at least over 2,000 dead in the region, mostly in Iran, and 3.2 million internally displaced in Iran, out of a population of 92 million people. I think everyone knows that on the first day of the bombing, the U.S. and Israel also bombed the residence of Khamenei, who was the so-called supreme religious leader, or was, and assassinated him and his wife and some of his family members, and some other leaders of the Islamic Republic and Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who were meeting in the same building but in a different room. And so that has been a big blow to the Islamic Republic. But at the same time, of course, as you can imagine, for common ordinary people, it's been really horrendous, because people are being bombed from the sky, and on the ground we have the very repressive apparatus of the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that's still very much intact. And I want to emphasize that, because the Trump administration and the Israeli Netanyahu administration thought that they would just go in and bomb everything, and then they would kill the leadership current leadership of the Islamic Republic, and then they would have regime change, or that the IRGC would capitulate to them, or they even thought that maybe they could have a combination of some of the IRGC leaders and a monarchy, the son of the former king. But the scenario that has actually materialized in front of our eyes is that even though they assassinated Khamenei and some of the top leaders of the Islamic Republic that hadn't been assassinated back in June, when an earlier US and Israeli invasion took place, or bombing took place, even though they've assassinated some key leaders, the IRGC is a decentralized organization. It's been training for decades for this type of warfare, and it's a horrendous authoritarian system. And they've been able to survive. And not only that, they have blocked the Strait of Hormuz now, which is the place where at least 20% of the global oil supply passes through, and something like anywhere from 50 to 80% of the oil supply of East Asia passes through the Strait of Hormuz. And from what I've read, they're even putting mines in the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, the Iranian regime is also using AI for fake videos to make itself look more powerful than it is, and to really promote disinformation. And I think all sides at this point are using AI to produce fake videos. Now, did you want me to go on to talk more about the region, the impact of the bombings on the region?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So Iran has retaliated. As I mentioned, this very powerful decentralized structure of the IRGC has been trained to retaliate when it's attacked, and so it's been retaliating by shooting missiles and sending drones to attack oil facilities in the Gulf. Of course, to attack Israel, different sites in Israel, including residential buildings in Israel, to attack oil facilities in the Gulf, airports, and again, water desalination plants in the Gulf. And Israel has in turn, and the attacks have also even included Turkey. So it's not only the Gulf, it's not only Israel and the Gulf countries, but also even Turkey has been hit. And now Israel has also invaded Lebanon again. And as of yesterday, there were over 700,000 internally displaced people in Lebanon. And of course, the Gulf nations are losing oil revenue because of the blockages of the Strait of Hormuz and the damage done to their oil facilities. And of course, Israel has intensified its attack on the Palestinians. I mean, we know about how Israel has been promoting a genocidal war against Palestinians in Gaza, where it's killed over 73,000 people. Israel has intensified its war on the West Bank. So that has been some of the regional impact. And sorry, was your question there? Did it stop there, or did you want me to talk about the progressives in Iran and internationally?
I think that's the next thing to talk about. This war is impacting us on the left, and what do we got to do about it? So talk about that, and also, are you able to have any contact with progressives inside Iran, given the internet blackout?
No, unfortunately, because of the 99% rate of effectiveness of the internet blockage imposed by the Iranian regime. No, most of us Iranians have not been able to communicate with our loved ones. There are some who have inside Iran who have access to Starlink, which is Elon Musk's satellite system, and so they can communicate. And there is this internal internet in Iran, which is of course the government. So some people can communicate internally, but some of us just know that we heard from a friend of a friend or a relative of a relative that our loved ones are alive, but we are not able to communicate. We're not able to use WhatsApp or have any kind of email or other communication. Now, what's happening to progressives in Iran is that, of course, they're devastated because, as I mentioned earlier, they're being bombed from the sky and on the ground. They're facing as an authoritarian religious fundamentalist and misogynist regime that has been telling them over and over again, especially at this point, that if they say anything, if anyone shows up on the street and says anything critical of the regime, or even says something celebratory about the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei, that they would be shot. And of course, I think most of your audience knows that in January, there were massive protests against the Islamic Republic, and some say over 1 million protested around the country in all the 31 provinces. And based on what we know, over the course of 3 days from January 8 to 11, at least 7,000 people were massacred. That's confirmed. But there are another 11,000 that are missing that are most likely have been most likely killed. But there's no confirmation of their murder, or their bodies haven't been found. So anywhere from 7,000 to 20,000 were massacred over the course of 3 days. So this is a brutal regime. And the regime is now moving Iran's political prisoners from where they are to unknown places. So we don't even know if some of them are alive, and we don't know how they're doing, under what conditions they're being kept. Usually in times of war, a lot of prisoners are released because they're going to be bombed from the sky, but not in this case. So that's another issue. Now, there have been some statements that have been issued by Iranian progressives opposing both the war, Israel and U.S. war, and also the Iranian regime itself, and also the monarchy, the son of the former king, claiming that he's an alternative, and also the MEK, which is the Mujahedin Khalq, which is a militarist cult that gets support from the U.S. government. And so there have been some principled statements that oppose both the bombings, the Iranian regime, monarchists, and the MEK. But at the same time, we have seen some Iranian intellectuals, even very prominent ones that are considered I knew as very progressive, who have in the course of the past month or even a couple of years ago have basically made an alliance with the son of the former king, in that they've gone to visit him, or they've entered into a coalition with him, thinking that he would bring an alternative to the Islamic Republic that would be better than what they live under. And it's really, for some of us, it's really shocking to see even ones that we respected highly. For instance, a very prominent and highly respected translator, Dariush Ashuri, prominent feminist writer, Shahla Shafiq, went to meet with Reza Pahlavi. Shirin Ebadi, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2005, she entered into a coalition with Reza Pahlavi in 2023. then subsequently withdrew. But she and some other Iranian intellectuals, progressive intellectuals, issued a statement shortly before this latest bombing saying that they wanted the US to invade. They wanted help in that respect. And I don't even consider that to be help, but that is how they presented it. So, and then what we're also seeing among progressives is, for instance, among the national minorities, the most progressive of which have been the Kurds in Iran. We've seen an alliance of 5 Kurdish parties: the Kurdish Democratic Party, the Iranian equivalent of the PKK, which is Abdullah Öcalan's organization, and another party called the Party of Iranian Freedom for Kurdistan, and one of the Komele parties, one of the Komele parties, they're West Komele parties. They've all come together in an alliance to talk about how to present an alternative at this time when there's war. And so it's not clear to what extent they want to maybe collaborate, work with the US and Israeli governments. Some of that is not clear, but we do know that the US has talked about arming some Kurdish fighters, some Kurdish Peshmerga. Trump talked about that last week, and we've seen some evidence of that. But at the same time, the Trump administration took back what it said because, of course, Turkey, which is a member of NATO and has been very brutal toward the Kurdish population of Turkey and the region. Turkey is, of course, very much opposed to any kind of help to Kurdish fighters to bring down the Iranian regime. And so that does not seem to be what the US is planning to do at this point. My own perspective, of course, is that the Kurds have been so betrayed by these alliances with these superpowers or even regional powers that it would be really a huge mistake for them to think that collaborating with US and Israel would liberate them. I mean, let's not forget what the US did just to the Kurds in Syria just a couple of months ago and pushed them out of their homes to give more power to the al-Shar government of the new al-Shar government of Syria. So that is some of what I wanted to cover on the issue of the state of the Iranian progressives. And then as far as the international left is concerned, again, it's good to see some of the statements that are, some of the English language statements that are signed by international academics and leftists that oppose both the war, the US and Israeli bombing, and also the Iranian regime. And here, for instance, I'm looking at one signed by 350 researchers and activists that say that our role is to be a voice for those independent peace seekers and democracy seekers in Iran, and not to stand by and side with rape and occupation, authoritarianism and repression. So that's good to see. But at the same time, what we're also seeing is that, of course, a big chunk of those on the left are saying that they think the only reason this war started is that Israel wants to take all of Palestinian land, and the US wants to reshape Israel, and the US want to reshape the region, and the US wants oil, control over the oil, and therefore, they say that because the Iranian government has been giving arms and money to Hamas and Hezbollah of Lebanon, therefore we should side with the Iranian government, which is, of course, a really inhuman, insane argument in my view, because instead of siding with the forces that are suffering in the region, both under the imperialist, foreign imperialist rule and regional imperialist rule and authoritarianism, they are siding with an authoritarian government like Iran, and that to me is not what being progressive is about. And then as far as the other international efforts are concerned, the Ukrainians have reached out to Iranians to express their solidarity with their opposition to the Iranian regime and also any kind of military intervention. This was a statement that Ukrainians published at the time of the January massacre, shortly after the January massacre that I referred to, a statement by the Ukrainian social movement or Socialny Ruch that is available on the, I believe it's available on the Ukraine Solidarity Network page. And I thought that was a very principled statement and the Ukrainians also want support from Iranians, because Iran, of course, had prior to this war had been helping Russia, sending missiles and drones to Russia to bomb Ukrainian infrastructure and kill Ukrainian civilians. So there are some very important principled Ukrainian progressives who have been reaching out to Iranians to express their solidarity and to get solidarity from Iranians. I personally have also received requests from Chinese progressives who oppose both the war, the Israeli-US bombings, and the regime, and the monarchists, and the MEK. So it's good to see that there are these international efforts. I've also been seen efforts by Pakistani and Afghan progressives who have organized events in solidarity with Iranians against the regime and also against the bombings, and involving both Pakistani feminists and Afghan feminists and other intellectuals, bringing in Iranians for a dialogue. Farooq Saleh-Riya, who's a Pakistani academic, just organized an event last week, and the video of that is available if anybody wants to see it. And so it's a mixed situation, but I think that's some of what I wanted to say. Thank you.
We have a link to a statement by Iranian-Americans for Peace and Democracy that is, you don't have to be Iranian, you can sign it as a supporter. So let's put that link in the chat so people can take a look at that. It's against the war and it's against the regime.
Yes.
Very simple statement. Frieda signed it, I signed it. You should sign it, those of you listening. So
yes,
let's put that link.
Please sign it.
Let's put that link in the chat. Let's talk about the opposition to the war here in the U.S. I think you hinted at this, and that frankly, the group who has been calling, at least on the internet, or the groups, the Answer Coalition and the United Anti-War, UNAC, United National Anti-War Coalition, they are supporting the Iranian regime as supposedly anti-imperialist, which I think is absurd. There is no class politics in that position. Fascists are not going to defeat Western imperialism.
Yeah.
That's something, working people, popular classes are going to have to do within the West. And I don't think their demonstrations are going to draw a broad support, because most peace-minded Americans don't want to march under the Iranian flag.
Yes.
They want to march for an end to the war, and without having to say they support the Iranian regime. So that's, I think, a problem that we're going to have to address in the United States in the anti-war movement.
I just wanted to also bring up that my librarian colleagues organized an event for the librarians for the American Library Association, my colleagues in the Social Responsibilities Roundtable, and uh, it was basically an informational webinar on Iran, and we had several Iranian activists, academics involved, and it got a good response. And so that's also available. I can make that link available if you wish. That I would recommend that too.
Okay. Ginny, you put the link in the private chat, not the public chat. People are looking for that link to the Iranian-Americans for Peace and Democracy. So let's get that in the public chat.
But concerning what you were saying earlier, yeah, I think it's really incredible that although 60% of the US public opposes this war, doesn't want it, those on the left who have the power to organize more events, a lot of them are either siding with Iran. I've heard of even demonstrations where they're holding up pictures of Khamenei. Maybe that was in Europe. I'm not sure. Maybe I was in Europe and not in the US, but I've heard of that. And so it's unfortunate because this is an opportunity for progressives to reach out to a broader segment of the US population to talk about the connection between fascism and war. Fascism, always, as Robert Paxton describes it in The Anatomy of Fascism, under fascism, internal so-called purification, labeling segments of the population as other and pushing them out or killing them, that goes hand in hand with external imperialist expansion. So you can't have fascism without imperialist expansion. And also the connection between capitalism and war, that capitalism itself is a system that is based on competition between different capitals, and it too leads to war and destruction. But at the same time, I wanted to also bring up this issue of the ways in which this current war, launched by the US and Israel, and now with the Iranian retaliations, it is actually helping Russia and China. It is helping Russia in the sense that the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz means that, of course, 20% of the world's oil output doesn't get to where people need them, and also that it increases the price of oil. The U.S. has now lifted sanctions on Russian oil. They say for 30 days, but most likely they'll keep them lifted. So Russia is gaining a great deal, and also the fact that the anti-missile systems that Ukraine was buying with its own money and with European money to defend itself against Russian bombings and missile attacks and drone attacks, those anti-missile systems are now being sent to the Middle East for a war that is insane, that didn't have to start. And so that means that Russia will be stronger in bombing Ukraine at the time when Ukraine still had a chance to defeat Russia. And as far as China is concerned, the fact that all this energy and force is going toward the Middle East is making China stronger in Taiwan. And apparently when Putin and Trump meet later for a summit between the US and China, that issue of Taiwan is one of the issues that they're going to be negotiating about. And we wonder, is is the Trump administration going to let China take over Taiwan because it wants to focus on the Middle East? Is this all part of this strategic doctrine of the Trump administration and other powers that are turning the world into spheres of influence for now, and letting each other have their spheres of influence for at least for a while, before they start another war between the three of them, or two on one side, China and Russia on one side, and Iran, U.S. on the other side. We don't know, but it seems that the powers that are really gaining from this war are Russia and China.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal had a headline when the war broke out saying Putin is smirking because oil prices are going up. And this was before Trump lifted the oil sanctions on Russia. Let's put another article in the chat that elaborates on this by Dan Labatz and Stephen Shalom, called Ukraine at Greater Jeopardy with War in the Middle East, which, lays out in more detail what we just talked about. So that, I think, is worth a read. It came out yesterday. What do you think about Zelensky offering the Gulf states and the U.S. Help with shooting down drones, which the interceptor drones Ukraine can provide cost $1,000 each? And the morons running the U.S. military operation have been spending $4 million on Patriot interceptors and up to 12 or 13,000 on THAAD interceptors to take down $50,000 Iranian Shahed drones. And so Zelensky's offered help to the U.S. and the Gulf states. Some of the Gulf states have taken them up on it. But yesterday, Trump, showing how dumb he is, said, "Oh, we got better drone technology. We don't need Ukraine's help." And Ukraine was hoping to get more Patriot missiles, which they're running short of. They're all being diverted to the Middle East. So I guess I'm asking, what do you think the political impact internationally is of Ukraine offering to help shoot down these Shahed missiles aimed at the Gulf states and Israel and U.S. military bases in the region?
Ukraine is fighting for its life, as you know better than anyone else, because you're so involved in Ukraine solidarity work. And Ukraine has been suffering from Iranian Shahed drones for a number of years. So given that, unfortunately, even from within Iran, there wasn't much support from, I'm talking about from within the progressive community in Iran, with some exceptions. There wasn't really any kind of massive expression of support for the Ukrainian struggle and opposition to Iran selling missiles and drones to Russia to bomb Ukraine. So that type of solidarity was not created. Some of us tried, and I'm still trying, but it didn't happen. So, and I can understand if I put myself in Zelensky's shoes, I can understand why he would do this, because Ukrainians are desperate. They're not just giving their technology, they're selling their technology in exchange for arms and anti-missile systems to defend themselves against Russian drones. So I can understand that. I can understand why Zelensky is doing that. But at the same time, of course, from the vantage point of the global South, it looks bad. And given that so many within the left, especially within the global South left, have been presenting the Russia's invasion of Ukraine as a proxy war between Russia and the U.S. and the West, and not as a war of liberation of the Ukrainians to maintain their independent country. Given that discourse already exists and is so dominant within the global South left, this will, of course, further help that discourse. They're basically they're going to use that to say that we shouldn't be defending the Ukrainian struggle against Russia. But at the same time, I think it's very important to see that the there is an alliance between U.S. and Russia now. That there is a clear, open alliance between the Putin administration and the Trump administration, both for ideological reasons, because they're both fascists, and also because the Trump administration doesn't really want the limited democracy that exists in Europe to survive. It would rather allow Putin and Russia to take over not only Ukraine but Europe. So it's a very complicated situation, and unless people delve into the complexities, they're not going to be able to analyze it properly. Plus, of course, Russia is now helping Iran with giving Iran the locations of the US bombings. And Trump even said in an interview a couple of days ago, he said, yes, they're probably doing that. But then Witkoff said that, the Russian administration has told us they're not, and we're taking them at their word. So that's just another manifestation of the fact that the alliance between the Trump administration and the Russian administration is so strong that even the fact that Russia is helping Iran at a time when US and Israel are bombing Iran is not going to break that alliance.
And I think you have to bring Netanyahu into the alliance of authoritarians.
Yes.
Ginny, I just put a link to an article that I wrote called Sergei Lavrov and Vulgar Anti-Imperialism. About 2 years ago, Lavrov said in an interview in Russia that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Hamas must be destroyed as a whole and as a military force. And Lavrov says, it sounds like demilitarization of Ukraine. He also said that extremism must be eliminated in Gaza. It sounds like denazification of Ukraine, which is, so then the question is, because that interview was in Russian domestic media, but Russia Today or RT put it out to the world. And you have to ask yourself why. And I think you have to realize that there's like 2 million dual Israeli Russian citizens who have political impact in both Russia and Israel. In fact, when Netanyahu last ran for re-election, he had a 6-story tall banner of him shaking hands with Putin. That was on one side of the Likud headquarters. On another side was a picture of him shaking the hands of Donald Trump.
Wow.
So I think Putin is playing both sides of this.
Yes, yes.
And that's why he's smirking, because he's getting, his revenues have gone up by different estimates, maybe $10 billion in the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
That he wouldn't have had. And Russia was really in a financial bind, and the sanctions were biting. And they account for 30 to 50% of Russia's national budget every year, the last decade. And their military budget's 40% of their national budget. So the oil exports and gas exports are paying for their war machine.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Putin would like to see this war go on and the prices stay high.
Yes.
So he's not mad that, Putin is attacking Iran, even though he's nominally giving some support to Iran. It's like, to me, it's like the US when it supported both Iran and Iraq when they spent 8 years, slaughtering each other in the 80s. And, the US leaders were saying, that's what we want.
Yes.
It's, it just shows how vicious imperialism is, whether it's US or Russian or Israeli. So
yeah, that's it. It's an important analogy.
Okay, yeah, that link got in there. So we have some questions in the chat, Frieda. Why don't we go to those? Scout 164 says, this might sound like a conspiracy theory, but Afari, do you think a combo of both Russia and Israel are taking advantage of the U.S., Russia to divert allies away, Israel to take over the Middle East? That's kind of what we were just talking about.
Well, but I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I think it's the nature of capitalism, that capitalism is about different capitals competing with each other for power, for control over capitals. And so at this moment, what we're seeing is that it's in the interest of Russia to help both Israel and Iran. And it's in the interest of Israel to get support from the US and push the US to get involved in this war. But it's also, from the vantage point of the Trump administration, it's in their interest to go in and reshape the Middle East and have control of the region and have some type of alliance between the Gulf states and Israel, and just forget about the Palestinians. But I don't think this is a conspiracy theory. And we have to be really careful about that, because I am also very concerned about the ways in which, for instance, when Israel is criticized, for some within the anti-war camp, it's more from a anti-Semitic vantage point, rather than saying, okay, this is a state, this is a capitalist state with its own regional and ambitions, imperial ambitions, and that is what defines the connection, the relationship between the Israel and the U.S. It's not some kind of Jewish conspiracy.
So Scout 164 had another question. This is something I need to ask because Iran is only one part of the problem. What methods should be done to weaken Cold War era propaganda so we don't continue wars like this?
To weaken Cold War era propaganda. Okay, of course, Iran is only one part of the problem. And what we need to do is to say that a principled position is to oppose a US and Israeli bombing of Iran, to oppose the Iranian regime, to end this war immediately, because it's doing so much damage, not only to Iranians, to the region, to the world. As we mentioned, it's damaging the Ukrainians, it's helping other authoritarian powers in the world, other authoritarian and fascist powers in the world. That's number one. And the second question is, okay, there's so much injustice in the Middle East and in the world. But if we just want to look at the issues in the Middle East, we have capitalist exploitation, we have discrimination against national ethnic minorities, religious minorities, we have misogyny and patriarchy, we have severe environmental problems in the Middle East, water shortage, lack of enough land for growing, cultivating food. The educational issues, religious fundamentalist problems, these are the issues that have to be addressed. And it's the forces on the ground that have to address them. But if they're being bombed from the sky, and if their authoritarian governments are killing them on the ground, and if they're being put in prisons, and if those political prisoners are then being taken away and possibly massacred at this time, taking advantage of the war, we're not going to have the forces that we need to solve the problems on the ground from a grassroots level. We're only going to strengthen the authoritarian powers.
Yeah, I would add that, what we inherited from the Cold War era is campism, where people that were supportive of the Soviet Union decided they were the lesser evil and we allied with them against the West. And then there were people in the West that said, well, the West is, including social democrats, who said the West is democratic, the lesser evil, therefore we ally with Western imperialism against the Soviet bloc. And what both positions have, these are campists, they're in one camp or the other, is that they're in solidarity with nation states, capitalist states in today's world, all of them, instead of solidarity among peoples at the grassroots. And that's, where we should be standing. So, in terms of Ukraine solidarity, it's very frustrating to debate people who have this geopolitical analysis, but no class analysis. And they've never talked to a damn Ukrainian. And they're allied with the Russians based on propaganda that the Kremlin puts out, and they get it through, filtered through, podcasters, like the Gray Zone, etc. So I think for us, we need to be in solidarity with, progressive movements in these different countries, and not saying we're back in one capitalist state against another. That's not the job of the left. Okay, here's another question or comment. B.D. Dimmitt, we need to be pushing collaboration with China and India to ramp up as a global team, production, R&D, and distribution of renewable energy infrastructure. The decentralization will make wars more difficult to prosecute, take away the motivation of oil, build the concept of allies as people who help each other do good things, and fight pollution and climate change.
I mean, I totally agree that we need to focus on renewable energy. Now, how much collaboration with China and India? I mean, if it's collaboration, not on the basis of accepting authoritarian policies, but collaboration with Chinese and Indian engineers and activists and civil society people, absolutely we need that. But I think we also need to be aware that to the extent that the Chinese government promotes renewable energy, it's still for imperialist and capitalist purposes. So we need to have clear statements and clear perspectives on the type of renewable energy that is also not used for capitalist purposes.
There's a good article about that today in the Washington Post about a Chinese electric vehicle factory in Brazil, where they brought in Chinese workers who were basically enslaved. It got so bad that the Brazilian government intervened. I mean, look that up. The Chinese, yes, we should collaborate on renewable technology, and the Chinese have done a great job on that. And Trump is an idiot, to put, tariffs on solar panels and electric vehicles, and instead of collaborating and learning. But we, as you said, China is very exploitative. They have nearly 500 million people who are migrant workers. They can't get social benefits in the cities where they work. They have to go back to the rural areas where there are no jobs. So they're in a very bad position and super exploited by both Chinese and foreign corporations. So, with that in mind, I agree that, China and also India are moving forward on renewable energy, putting the U.S. to shame, and so is Ukraine. There have been articles recently. Putin's bombing of the energy infrastructure has forced Ukraine to go to renewables because they're distributed and decentralized. You can't take them out with one set of bombs because solar panels are all over the place, wind generators are all over the place. They can set up microgrids so the grid is less vulnerable. And that's what Ukraine is doing.
Yeah.
And before Putin really focused on the energy infrastructure of Ukraine, there was a debate in Ukraine. And the oligarchs in the utility and energy industry wanted to rebuild their gas-fired and coal-fired plants and build more nuclear power plants. Now they understand, for security reasons, if not climate reasons, they need to go to renewables. So that is, happening. Again, Ukraine is way ahead of the United States on that. Dee Dimmitt, it doesn't matter nearly as much what politics persist on the other side of things as it matters whether there is a livable planet at the end.
But the two are interconnected. I don't think you can separate the two. In other words, the reason why our planet is in so much trouble is that we have a very exploitative system of production called capitalism that uses both humanity and nature as just a mere means for the production of monetary value, and therefore then ends up with a system in which the accumulation of monetary value becomes an end in itself. So in order to change that, we need to change the mode of production. And unless we do, we can't really have any kind of fundamental change in society. We can't address the environmental issues in a fundamental way.
The other thing about capitalism, competitive accumulation drives endless growth on a finite planet. So you can't have an economic system that is in balance with nature, that provides people's needs without depleting the natural world under capitalism. It's got to be a socialist system where there's public ownership, democratic planning, and a political agreement as to what we produce and how much of it. Andrew Hager, speaking of renewable energy, Frieda Afary, where do you stand on researching a formula for the perfect torrefied biomass to replace coal and anthracite? Same question for biofuels to replace gas.
To tell you the truth, I really don't know much about that. All I know is that, because I did some research on, for a series I did on humanist alternatives, and one of the series was about, one segment was about the environment. And what I know is that solar energy is so much cheaper nowadays and so much more available, and the technology is so prevalent and so easy to use. And it seems that the reason why we're not seeing more of it is that once you install solar energy, it just keeps going. It's not a money-making operation. And it's, as Howie mentioned, it's really atrocious to see that the Trump administration is dismantling what was established under the Biden administration to promote solar and wind energy. I mean, I had problems with the Biden administration too, although I voted for Democrats in the last election. But the fact that it's not only that in the U.S. we're not doing enough, we're destroying what we already have. So we are falling way behind the rest of the world, and it's damaging. The greatest damage will just be done to us in the U.S.
Yeah, I would just add briefly that biofuels, biomass, release carbon. You can say it's recycled, whereas fossil fuels is carbon that's been sequestered and is now put in the atmosphere. But the other thing is it takes up a lot of land to produce all that biomass that could be used for food or carbon sinks in the form of forests and wetlands and so forth. So, and the solar and wind is cheaper. So I don't think it makes any sense to go in that direction. Before we get to the next question, Ginny, let's get the two interviews that Frieda did with Oksana Dudchak in Ukraine, which go into a lot more detail. You know, the subtitle of the first interview is Women's Rights, Class Contradictions, Islamic Fundamentalism, and Leftist Mistakes. And second one is about the Iranian rebellion, the role of Russia, and the responsibility of intellectuals. There's a lot of material there that Frieda has, provided in those interviews. So let's get those two in the chat so people can read. And Scout 164 asks, any thoughts on Graham Plattner speaking out against capitalism and why the Iran war is again done so Trump prevents the Epstein files release.
I'm sorry, can you tell me what Graham Plattner said? Because I'm not familiar with what he said against capitalism.
Yeah, neither am I. I know he's speaking out against the war. But what about the part about you think Trump went to war to prevent the Epstein
Oh,
files?
okay. Well, I mean, there's no doubt that the fact that Epstein basically built this human trafficking network, trafficking women and girls with the help of both mega capitalists and even intellectuals and academics. It is just an abomination. It just shows how gender violence and rape and capitalism are intertwined. You can't separate them. And that is an extremely important issue. Now, to what extent the Trump administration started the war to take attention away from the Epstein files, maybe to some extent, but I don't think that the main reason was that. As far as I'm concerned, the main reason was that the Trump administration thinks that it can, with the help of Israel and the Gulf states and Turkey, just reshape the Middle East. And that's what it wants to do. And of course, given that this is a fascist administration that rejects any type of reason and logic, even capitalist reason and logic, it just went ahead without thinking about the consequences, thinking that, okay, it's going to be a quick job and either part of the regime will surrender or collapse and be able to have some type of Venezuela operation. And it turned out that it was a lot more difficult than that. And not only that, that IRGC is very trained at retaliatory attacks that just create havoc in the region and in the world. So, so yes, again, so I'm very, very concerned about the Epstein affair and all these facts still being hidden, and what we're seeing about the degree of involvement, not only among people that we wouldn't be surprised to see being involved in trafficking of women, but even among some supposedly respectable intellectuals and academics. I don't mean to take away any attention from that.
Ginny just put in the chat another article that refers to a women's march in Ukraine, in Kyiv. And also there was one in Odessa, organized by a women's march coalition. It included Socialny Ruch, or Social Movement, the Socialists that we work with in the Ukraine Solidarity Network. The Green Party was involved, and a women's veterans organization. They have their own organization, and the demands of the march were about treating service women and all service people, with respect to women's rights and also the rights of service people as working people. That was one demand. There was a demand to repeal or drop a civil code reform that would make it harder for women to get divorces, allow religious approval of marriage for women as early as 14. I mean, a whole lot of, backward things that they were marching against. And then also demanding that Russians release the service women they have captured. And it was, you can read the article. It was in Euromaidan Press or Euromaidan Press. And the thing I'll just say about it is, one, you couldn't have a march like that in Russia or Iran today. Some of the people that are against Ukraine solidarity say the Ukrainians are a neo-Nazi government, which is ridiculous. So they were marching, a large march, in wartime. And what was the other point about that I was going to make? One of the Greens who marched, Tetiana Bodun, who's one of their leaders, she marched with a sign that said, "Another Vova," another dictator. And that was comparing Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. The nickname is Vova. And it shows that, while the Greens and other progressives in Ukraine support the resistance to Russia's invasion, they're very critical of the Zelensky regime, which is a nuance that, campists who oppose Ukraine solidarity just can't seem to get in their head, that you can support Ukraine's resistance to the Russian invasion without supporting everything that the Zelensky government's doing. So I thought that was an interesting article that people would be interested in reading.
May I say something about this and then go, because I have to go to work.
Sure.
It's 1:03 at my time. That I just read about this protest, and as someone who's been in contact with Ukrainian feminists and also Russian feminists, I definitely support any expression of protest against patriarchy and misogyny anywhere. And I agree with Howie that at least in Ukraine, women can protest against this. Just as a few months ago, we saw the protests against the Zelensky government trying to shut down the independent fact-finding mission that was basically checking the work of the government, make sure that they were not lying and they were not hiding any information. There was an effort to shut that down, and because of the protests, that got reinstated. So I am very happy to see these protests. At the same time, I don't think it means that you can say that the Ukrainian government is the same as the Russian government. The only way to help the Ukrainian women liberate themselves is to stop Russia's invasion and defeat Russia, so that Ukrainians can breathe and reestablish more of the democratic norms that they had before the invasion. And that's also the way to help Russian women, because the defeat for the Putin government in Russia means that more of the opposition forces that are democratic minded will have a chance to speak out, hopefully, and that will help Russian feminists as well. So in order for us to help the cause of feminism and women's rights, we need to oppose this horrible imperialist invasion. Thank you so much for everything. And I'm going to leave at this point.
All right. Thank you, Frieda. I think you help people understand the situation with this war a lot better. So
thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So next week, we're going to have Justin Phillip, who is a candidate of the Green Pacific Party in Oregon for U.S. Congress. And so he'll be our guest next week. And as always, I urge people to be involved in a group. It's going to make you smarter, and it's going to improve your morale as we, exchange views and work together and stay active. It does make a difference. Trump, I think, is committing political suicide with this war and the other things he's doing. The Republicans are going to get their butts kicked in November. And then we got another problem. The Democrats don't have solutions to, the climate crisis or the inequality crisis or the militarism crisis. So we have our work cut out for us, but what we do makes a difference. So stay active and have a good week, and we'll see you next week.